It's a new update, and I'm sure you guys will be asking me, well, what should I be using now? What's changed, what's improved, and what should I try differently? And in this video today, we're going to be covering all of that from Warzone Season 3's reloaded patch notes. Keeping a good track record and continuing to update the game in a positive way is something that's really difficult to do, but Raven Software are really getting there. We've gone from, a couple months back where updates were absolutely terrible to now where we've had 2 to 3 really solid updates that change the balancing of the game and allow more and more weapons to be viable options in Warzone. I think honestly, up until this update now, the meta has been more or less perfect, and that will probably continue to be the same throughout this new update too. So let's talk about what's changed and what you need to be on the lookout for in Season 3 Reloaded. Well, to start with, we have the reduction of stopping power across the board. It's been substantially reduced in all modes, which is very, very exciting. Honestly, I would be flat out happy if they just got rid of stopping power completely, but they're hoping to make it a tiny percentage of loot, and hopefully that means that it'll be less frustrating in the vast majority of games. Stopping power is completely unbalanced, it's impossible to counter, and I'm really glad that it's been massively reduced, and hopefully if we're lucky, we will reach a point where they remove it. 2 new weapons are coming to the game, one at launch and one further down the line, and we'll keep an eye out for these, but the ballistic knife is coming in, allowing for close-up melee and of course a projectile blade. I can see that actually being surprisingly semi-lethal, or at least a decent amount of fun in Warzone, so definitely be on the lookout for the ballistic knife. And a full-auto AMP-63 pistol is coming mid-season. Again, I think Raven Software are doing a really good job of balancing weapons before they hit the front now, and I imagine that this pistol won't really be a meta breaker. Moving on, let's talk about the weapons that you need to absolutely use since the update has changed. There's been some changes that have massively increased the versatility and viability of some of the weapons in game. So to start with, the AK-74U has had its neck multiplier increased from 1 to 1.4, its sprint to fire speed increased by 20%, bullet velocity slightly decreased by 15%, and maximum damage range reduced by 25%. But this means that the AK-74U is now a really solid medium-range SMG, much like the LC-10, and that increased multiplier on the neck means that you're going to have more damage output if you're somebody who typically aims for the head. So the AK-74U is definitely something I would recommend trying, at least. It's definitely not one of the shining stars of this update, but something that's definitely been improved. Moving on, we have the PPSH 41, and this is something that's been drastically improved, and actually got improvements in the previous update, which got rid of the open bolt delay and made it a much more fast-firing weapon. And the PPSH has had its maximum damage increased from 27 to 28, and its damage range increased by nearly 4%. Honestly, the PPSH, of course, has one of the massive mags of the SMGs. I believe you can get a 71-round magazine in this thing, and with these new attachment options and the ability to have a slightly increased damage modifier, I think the PPSH, with its really fast fire rate, will be one of the most viable SMGs in the game now. So I highly recommend trying out the PPSH again. Of course, this gun is something that bounces all over the place, but it seems that this new update is trying to take it to a new level. Now the final upgrades are all to snipers, and some of these are pretty exciting. The Swiss K31 has had a pretty drastic improvement. Flinch resistance has been greatly increased, ADS speed has been increased, and stability has been increased, but honestly I think this gun will still be outperformed by the Kar 98, so nothing to really report there. Of course, you have the Barrett 50 cal, which is, I think the M82 that they call it now, which is Sniper Rifle Charlie. It's all very confusing. Has had its bullet velocity increased by 15%, its extremity multiplier increased by 0.1, and rate of fire has actually gone up by 0.5, which is pretty impressive. I think this means that this sniper rifle will definitely be more fun to use and at least slightly more competitive, but whether or not you're willing to use a high recoil semi-auto sniper in Warzone is kind of a question. That being said though, it's nice to see that they're trying to make it at least more fun to use. Now onto the 2 snipers that are definitely going to be something you want to use immediately, right away. Do it now, absolutely. We have the LW3 Tundra and of course the ZRG 20mm. Now, the Tundra was already a pretty good sniper rifle, in fact one of the best in Warzone in terms of bullet velocity, just the feel of the weapon, the damage it can output, the fact that it has a fast mag, and of course all Cold War snipers let you use 4x optics which have no glint but have a crazy level of zoom. So effectively you would have a no glint fast optic that can hit people at range, and it's just a really impressive system to have. Now the Tundra's only failing grace really was the fact that the aiming stability was awful. When you held a Tundra aimed down sight, it was almost as though somebody was like swaying your gun for fun, and aiming stability has been massively increased on the Tundra, making it one of the most viable snipers in Warzone now, and something that's really exciting. Now, the ZRG has one of the fastest bullet velocities in Warzone, up to about 500 meters. It's better than the HDR, the SPR, and after 500 meters it kind of drops off a little bit. But it's actually gotten even better as well. It's had bullet penetration increased, which is something I didn't really think the ZRG needed, but apparently it has. It's had the upper multiplier for the torso going from 1.25 to 1.7, the lower multiplier from 1.1 to 1.25, extremities have increased by 0.1, ADS speed has been decreased by 4%, bullet velocity has been decreased slightly, move speed decreased slightly, and ADS move speed decreased slightly. Now, the ZRG is effectively now a much more viable, powerful weapon, and of course still has ridiculous bullet velocity, but I think they slowed it down just a little bit to make sure that it was more of an anti-material rifle and less of a HDR. But on the grand scheme of things, you definitely want to check out the LW3, and you definitely want to check out the ZRG 20mm. Both of these are now super viable options if they weren't already, and have options that make them short range viable as well. On top of that, the actual flash guard has had its vertical recoil control increased slightly, and the suppressor has been changed, which no longer reduces bullet velocity, it in fact now increases bullet velocity. It also increases ADS speed and increases sprint to fire speed. So it's kind of a shift from the monolithic suppressor, so to speak. Effectively, if you use a monolithic suppressor, you add penalties to your weapon whilst increasing bullet velocity. Now, the base suppressor increases bullet velocity less so than the monolithic suppressor, but has benefits to sprint to fire speed and ADS speed, meaning that those two are now quicker, which is definitely a weird option, but it's mad that they're making this kind of viability available, and I'm really glad that they're trying to do that, trying to make things just a little bit more viable across the board, and make sure that the game isn't so heavily dependent on the existence of monolithic GRU and agency suppressors. And finally, of course, there are two new operators, Rambo, John McClane. Don't really think those matter, various different points of interest, but here's everything that you needed to know about the meta changing in Warzone. If this video was helpful, leave a like, leave a sub, and definitely feel free to try out some of these new weapons and improved weapons. I honestly think the meta in Warzone is in a really good place right now. The ZRG, the Tundra, the PPSH, and even the AK-74U have had statistic buffs that just make them much more viable weapons. Ultimately, I still think the Swiss and, as they call it, Sniper Rifle Charlie, or the M82, are just a little bit hit and miss, but the ZRG Tundra PPSH are really up there, and I'm really impressed with this update from Raven Software. I'll catch you guys in the next video, and I'll see you there.